Last Saturday class, we were talking about Plato, who said one who lived well during his lifetime would return to his source and stay there in bliss. That is what Plato believed, or Plato declared as his philosophy. But if he fails to go to his source second time, he'll be born as a woman or one man as weak as woman. Still, if he doesn't improve, then he becomes a brute. Then he should work his way up again, get back into the second and then the first, and then lead the right kind of life and go to his source. That is how the man is supposed to travel, is what Plato said. Now, moving on, we say Dr. Elam, E-L-A-M. Dr. Elam, HPB says about this man, thinks differently about epidemics. She is going back to the subject of epidemic. We considered it last class also. Elam says something differently about epidemics. The causes of the spreading of epidemics and the speed with which they increase, rapidity, the causes of the spreading of epidemics and the rapidity, the reasons are not known. That's what Elam is saying. He says the causes of the spreading of epidemics and the rapidity with which it increases, the reasons are not known. The epidemic strongly develops, says Dr. Elam. HPB says powerful clairvoyants and adepts in mesmerism have talked that the epidemics are caused by physical manifestations. For example, epilepsy, hemonervous disorders, and some are due to the mental or somatic causes. So, the epidemic, the reasons for the speedy spread of epidemics, the reasons are not known. That is what Elam said. And the epidemic strongly develops is what he is confirming. HPB now says powerful clairvoyants and adepts in mesmerism have talked that the epidemics are caused by physical manifestations. For example, epilepsy, hematonervous disorder. Hemato means something to do with the blood and nervous disorders, and some are due to mental or somatic causes. Most of the diseases are somatic diseases, they say, psychosomatic, they say. So some are because of the mental condition, some are because of the psychosomatic reasons, and some are physical like epilepsy and nervous disorders and blood complications, diseases related to blood. These are all physical manifestations. That's what the clairvoyant said and mesmerists also said. Right. When there is violent disturbances caused by electric waves in the ether, when there are violent disturbances that are caused by electric waves in the ether, it will result in physical epidemic. So this is one reason. They say whenever there is a violent disturbance caused by the electric waves in the ether, ether is something which is spread all over our universe. So ether is there, the Akasha Tattva is there. When the disturbance is caused by the electrical waves, which are part of the ether, when that electrical disturbances, waves get disturbed violently, it will cause physical epidemic, which goes on increasing due to disturbances which are occurring in the ether. So whatever the nature of disturbances in ether, if they are violent in nature, they will result in physical epidemic. And the electric waves, they affect the ether. So ether is something which is there all over the universe. The Akasha Tattva is there in the universe. The disturbances which are caused by the electric waves, they will result in physical epidemic, which goes on increasing due to disturbances which are occurring in ether. So ether, disturbances to ether, the electrical waves, they all cause the epidemic. This is another theory. This is what clairvoyants have said. Clairvoyants have said this. Clairvoyants have seen the happening. They have seen whenever there is a disturbance to the ether caused by the electrical waves, that resulted in these physical epidemics. So, having seen this, the clairvoyants describe that disturbances are the reason or the cause. Disturbances to the ether are the causes for the physical epidemic. But this is what clairvoyants have said. But scientists don't accept this, and they are busy inventing new names for the epidemics. They don't know the reasons why epidemics are coming, but the scientists are busy trying to name those epidemics, give a different name to the epidemic. That's what they are bothered about. But they were not agreeing with clairvoyants what they have said. Scientists don't accept this, and they are busy inventing new names for their epidemics. Okay. Then HVB talks about Hugh Potet, who has been mentioned a number of times in our study. Hugh Potet, who is considered as an authority in mesmerism. He's the father of mesmerism, not father exactly, he's not the inventor, but someone who practiced it well. Hugh Potet, who is considered as an authority or an expert in mesmerism, he says, nature is revealing the secrets. Nature is revealing the secrets. He says the nervous fluid, which is called magnetism. The older men called it occultism or occult powers or the potency of magic. So Hugh Potet, P-O-T-E-T, D-U-P-O-T-E-T, Hugh Potet, who is considered as an authority in mesmerism, he says nature is revealing the secrets. So everything is happening because there is some disturbance to nature. Nature is giving out the reasons why these things are happening. That's what he's saying. He says the nervous fluid, which is called magnetism by the older men, and some more people called it occultism or occult powers or the potency of magic. The result of magic and sorcery is that these determine these attraction and the sudden impulses, these raving epidemic. Emitama? Okay. He says the nervous. Okay. He says the nervous fluid, which is called magnetism, the older men called it occultism or occult powers, and the potency of magic. See, this book, the entire book, the Isis Unveiled, is all about white magic. So we get this term magic every time. It means it's white magic. We don't have to imagine the other magic. But then there is a reference to sorcery here. But the result of magic and sorcery is that determines these attractions, the sudden impulses, these raving epidemics, the rages or antipathies. These convulsions are all due to magic. All the negative traits like rages, epidemics are due to sorcery. So there are two things. Magic is the result of certain things. Sorcery is the result of some things. So what is that? We'll see again. The Hugh Potet, who is considered as an authority of mesmerism, says nature is revealing the secrets. Nature has all the secrets. So he says the nervous fluid, which is called magnetism. In every being, there is a nervous fluid which is there, which is called magnetism. The older men called it occultism or occult powers or the potency of magic. All these are same names. The result of magic and sorcery. Magic is resulting in certain things. Sorcery is resulting in certain things. So now we'll know what exactly this is all about. The result of magic and sorcery is that determines these attractions, the sudden impulses, these raving epidemics, rages, antipathies, these convulsions are all due to magic. All the negative traits like rages, epidemics are due to sorcery. So it's the black magic which is responsible for epidemic, and the magic determines the sudden impulses which are there, sudden ups and downs of the current or the potency of magic. The sudden impulses are there, the rages are there, the antipathies are there, the convulsions are there. Convulsions mean the shaking of the bodies. All are due to magic. All the negative traits like rages, epidemics are due to sorcery. So sorcery and magic are basically the reasons for the epidemics and all the associated things like antipathies, rages, convulsions, and all that. Convulsions is the body shaking. Antipathy is you don't like certain things. That is antipathy. And these are all because of the negative traits, because of magic and sorcery. Jupiter says magic is based on the existence of the world placed without, not within us. So magic is coming into existence. Magic is based on the existence of the world placed without and not within us. So magic is acting on the manifestation which we see outside us, not within us. That's what he is saying. Jupiter says magic is based on the existence of the world placed without, means outside, not within. It is something on which it is acting. All these things are out of the human being, not within the human being. Due to certain practices, people get in touch with elements and beings living in nature. So this is another angle to this. There are certain practices people undertake and they get in touch with elements and beings living in nature. So there are a lot of beings living in nature. We have seen some time back also that there are helpful spirits, there are mischievous spirits, there are spirits who cause damage to us. So people get in touch with these elements and beings living in nature. These elemental beings, products of nature, take control of the person and withers and breaks him down. So those damaging elemental beings, they take control of the person and withers him and breaks him down. That means the person will not be healthy. He'll break down with disease. This is something which is something to be noted. That's what Jupiter is saying. Jupiter first said magic and sorcery are the result of these epidemics, rages, convulsions, antipathies. The negative traits like rages, epidemics are due to sorcery. The balance are because of the magic. Then magic is based on the existence of the world placed without. The world which is outside us. That is what the magic is based on. Or magic is working on that world which is outside us, not within us. But due to certain practices, magic is like that. But due to certain practices, people get in touch with elements and beings living in nature because they are dabbling with those elements, dabbling with those beings living in nature. The elemental beings, though products of nature, though they belong to the nature, they take control of the person and withers and breaks him down. So they see to it that that person is affected by the various epidemics or diseases or anything. It is like compared to the hurricane which removes the bushes. Hurricane means a wind at a high velocity. How it will remove the trees, not only trees, it removes bushes. So this is how these spirits, when we get to know them, we do not know how to control them. They take control of us and they will break us down. They will make us feel miserable. So it is like a hurricane which removes the bushes. That's what it's conveyed. It strikes at them at 1,000 places. So this particular elementals, they strike at them at 1,000 places without their realizing as to who caused the disturbance and destruction. So we will not be able to place our finger as to what exactly which element has struck us. But these elements strike us at the 1,000 places. Means there are so many avenues where they can hit us, 1,000 places, without their realizing as to who caused the disturbance and destruction. So once you fall into their hands, it is definitely destruction. It is something like falling a prey to them. So withers and breaks him down is what he has said earlier. Now he says, they strike at them at 1,000 places without their realizing. It strikes at them at 1,000 places without their realizing as who caused the disturbance and destruction. At the same time, that element is kind to some. So some elements are mischievous, some elements do cause harm to the individual. So when they cause harm to the individual, it breaks that individual, makes that individual a sick person. So it has got the ability to take control of the person and damage that person completely. Now he is saying the same time, element is kind to some. At the same time, some elements are kind to some, chooses them as friends, obeys their feelings and thought, answers their request, and tries to understand their signals and help them. So both varieties are there. We have seen this even in the 5th chapter when spirits or elements are hovering around, and these spirits are elementals. Some are helpful, some are mischievous, some cause harm. So when you do not know which is what, and you dabble with those elementals, what happens is they take control of you and they destroy you. That is one class of elementals. The second is sometimes an elemental which is kind to some, chooses them as friends, obeys their feelings and thought, answers their requests, and tries to understand their signals and help them. So the second elemental is almost like a servant to the person who has taken control of the element. The first one, the elemental controls the man. The second one, the elemental becomes a servant to the man. So in the second case, the element is kind to some, chooses them as friends, obeys their feelings and thoughts, answers their requests, and tries to understand their signals and help them. So not only were the signals they understand of the person who is controlling them, it helps them also. So there are two varieties which we have seen. The mischievous elements we have not touched upon here, but it is said there are three varieties of spirits or elementals. The one elemental which causes harm, the one element which will cause mischief, the one elementals which really help. The mischievous elements, what they do, suppose you have kept your belongings at one particular place. They simply remove it and keep it somewhere else. Or you have put something, very valuable thing, say your bed is in one particular direction. They come and change it in such a direction, you will be surprised as to who did this. So that sort of mischievous doings is what they used to perform. Even the Theosophical Society Adyar, I'm just saying something which I know personally. Some of these watch and ward staff, who used to keep vigil in the night. So they used to say, suppose they have got some time to rest. One person is resting, another person is working, or he is going around. So the person who is sleeping on a cot, suddenly he gets lifted from that place along with the cot, and the cot tumbles, and then this fellow is made to sleep on the cot, which is reversed. Where he was sleeping, that goes to the ground, and the legs come up, and he is made to sleep on that sort of a cot. This is something which they have reported. They are all mischievous spirits, but those spirits which cause bodily harm are also there. Those spirits which work like servants are also there. So this is something which we need to understand. So the element is kind to some, chooses them as friends, obeys their feelings and thought, answers their requests, and tries to understand their signals and help them. So this incident which I am talking about is the Theosophical Society. It has happened in the Alcott Gardens, Scout Camping Center to be precise. That is where it is. We need to open up and purify ourselves. This is what we need to do. We need to open up and purify ourselves to receive help. And when the purification is not done by men, nature has its own way to cleanse us. So we need to open up and purify ourselves to receive help. Suppose we need to get an element to help us, we should be pure enough. If you are pure enough, it will help us. If you are not pure enough, if you are somewhat dicey in your character, then the other elements which are mischievous or which are causing harm, they will take over. So we need to open up and purify ourselves to receive help. And when the purification is not done by men, nature has its way to cleanse us. So this is what this man is saying, Jupotet is saying. We need to open up and purify ourselves to receive help from these elementals. And when the purification is not done by men, nature has its own way to cleanse us. Sometimes punish us, sometimes subject us to a process where cleansing takes place. Both are possible. This fact is well demonstrated, says Jupotet, as mentioned by H.V.B. H.P. Blavatsky has quoted Jupotet, Dupotet, that's the name of the person. So this has been very carefully picked up and added here by H.P.B. So there are two types of elementals, one which will cause bodily harm, the other one which will not cause bodily harm, but work as a servant, help in every way. So that is there. And we need to purify ourselves. We need to be very pure individuals if we have to get the help from these elementals. If it is not, then the nature has its way of purifying us, says Jupotet. The fact is well demonstrated, says Jupotet, as mentioned by H.P.B. Then he further states that there are these forces who are mysterious beings having power and sometimes taking forms and shapes. He further states that there are these forces, these elemental forces. He further states that there are these forces, elemental forces, who are mysterious beings having power and sometimes taking forms and shapes. So they can assume any form, they can take any form, they can take any shape, and they move around. So this is also additional information he is giving. He further states that there are these forces who are mysterious beings having power and sometimes taking forms and shapes. They come in and go out. They don't need doors even if they are closed. They come in and go out. They don't need doors even if they are closed. They can stage an entry. So this is what they're capable of, the powers. They can come through the wall or come through the door. Even if the door is closed, they can come through the door or come through the wall. That's something which they can do. These elemental forces can do that. He further states that there are these forces who are mysterious beings having power and sometimes taking forms and shapes. They come in and go out. They don't need doors. Even if they are closed, they can stage an entry. So this is the power of those elementals. The followers of Hermes, the thrice greatest, the person who is considered as an authority, the Hermes, they understand this, say Jupotet. So not only what Jupotet says is right, he also says Hermes also believes in it. Hermes, people who followed Hermes also, they understand these concepts. I don't know. HPB talks about Cornelius Agrippa. This is the name of a person. HPB talks about now about Mr. Cornelius, Cornelius, Agrippa, Agrippa. Here is a gentleman who is from Germany. He is an occult writer and theologian. He's an occult writer and theologian. He's a physicist, so many things. So he is Cornelius Agrippa. So he is saying something which HPB has put it here. The universal force, the soul of the world, says this force can fertilize and make anything fruitful by infusing the divine properties. The universal force, the soul of the world, means the Atma of the world, the universal force which is occupying or which is encompassing the whole world. He says this force can fertilize and make anything fruitful by infusing the divine properties. By putting into this divine properties, by making it powerful, it fertilizes, means it makes it very active, more powerful, make anything fruitful by infusing the divine properties. When we use the objects, wear those objects, they communicate with us and they do good to our soul and body. So there are certain forms there are certain material which is formed. So the universal force, the soul of the world, this force can fertilize and make anything fruitful by infusing the divine properties. Into that matter or into that material, divine properties are infused, means they're made to enter that particular property. They become very powerful. So when we use these objects, wear these objects, they communicate with us and they do good to our soul and body. So when man wears these of some things which are manufactured or which are turned out from the universal force and matter, and divine properties are coupled with it, when we use those objects, wear those objects, they communicate with us and they do good to our soul and body. This is what this German occult writer is saying, Cornelius Agrippa. Further, human soul has the same essence that the universe has. Human soul has the same essence that the universe has. This is what theosophical belief also. Human soul has the same essence that the universe has. Whatever is there in the universe, it is also there in the human being or human soul. That is what he said. Human soul has the same essence that the universe has. The creation has a soul and it has marvelous power. So human soul has the same essence that the universe has, and the creation has marvelous power. So this soul, which is human soul, and the universal soul, they are similar in content, because whatever is there in the universe soul is also there in human soul. And he says soul has marvelous power. The power of the soul is extraordinary. One who harvests that power can grow to heights of his imagination. One who is able to make good use of the power which is there with him, within that Atma, within that soul, he can harvest that power, can grow to the heights of his imagination. Only he can put an end to it as long as he is imagining or he is visualizing certain good things. He can go on harvesting out of that power, means make that possible, make that as a reality. So soul has marvelous power. One who harvests that power can grow to the heights of his imagination and thought and get closer to the universal force, become one with that force. That is the whole idea. The soul, the human soul is one, the universal soul is another. The essence in both is same. So now he says the universal soul is something bigger. The human soul has also got marvelous powers. The human soul also has marvelous powers. So one who knows how to make use of that power, the soul's power, can grow to the heights of his imagination and thought and get closer to the universal force. So he can get closer. The individual soul can achieve anything which that particular person is able to imagine, visualize, or think. And then he can also get closer to the universal force and become one with the force. So this is possible. That is exactly what we are saying. When the soul is doing all that it requires to do, after the journey is over, after the obligatory journey is over, the soul gets back to the source, isn't it? That's the philosophy we have been taught. So the same thing Mr. Cornelius Agrippa also is talking. HPB talks about Cornelius Agrippa, German occult writer and theologian, and he says there is a soul to the world. That means universal soul. This force can fertilize and make anything fruitful by infusing the divine properties. So this particular force of the universal soul can make anything fruitful, means anything which comes into contact with that will become fruitful, will result in good things by infusing the divine properties. The divine properties are made part of this, anything which comes into contact with the universal force, and then they become very useful. When we use the objects, so such objects which have been infused with divine properties, when we use those objects, when we make something out of that and wear those objects, they communicate with us. So they are able to communicate with us. Suppose I'm making a ring out of it and I'm wearing it on my finger, it will communicate with me. That's what he's saying. And they do good to our soul and body. Not only to the body, it also does good to the soul. That is what he has mentioned. And then and additional information is, Human soul has the same essence that of the universal soul. Human soul has the same essence as that of the universal soul, and the creation also has similar power. Soul has marvelous power. When the universal soul is made of that, and the human soul is also made of the same essence, you can imagine what the universe is all about. The creation is part of that. Whatever is created in the universe is because of that. The soul is there in everything that is created in the world. Then, in talking about the individual soul, soul has marvelous power. One who harvests that power, that means one who can use that power, can grow to the heights of his imagination and thought and get closer to the universal force, become one with the force. So this is possible. He can become part of the universal force. He is individualized, he has become separate, he has become a spark of the divine. He can, by doing all that work which is required to be done, grow to a stage where he will become part of the universal force and become one with the force. This is possible for a human soul to merge with the universal soul. That is what Cornelius Agrippa talked about. Truth of the future will become the truth of the present. Truth of this future will become the truth of the present when the soul is merged with the universe. The truth of the future will become the truth of the present when the soul is merged with the universe. So this merging of the individual soul with the universal soul was talked about. So what Agrippa is talking about is truth of the future will become the truth of the present when the soul is merged with the universe. When the merger takes place, between the individual soul and the universal soul, the truth of the future will become the truth of the present. Means that there is no gap. Past, present, future is not there. Everything is present. Truth of the future will become the truth of the present when the soul is merged with the universe. So this is possible. The individual soul will become part of the universal force. And then there is only present, no future, no past. Time and space vanish before the presence of immortal entity. This is what he is driving at. When the soul becomes part of the universe, there is no future, there is no past, there is only present. This is what he stressed. Then next sentence is saying, time and space vanish before the presence of the immortal entity. Immortal entity means the ultimate God or power that we call God. Time and space vanish. They are not there with the universal immortal entity. Time and space vanish before the presence of the immortal entity. So when this individual soul has become part of the universal soul, that is exactly what has happened. There is no past, there is no future, there is only one thing, that is present. So that's what has happened. So to explain that concept, he said, time and space vanish before the presence of the immortal entity. When the immortal entity is there, there's only time. The time has no division. Similarly, no space. Everything is encompassed. Everything, the entire universe is spread with his presence. So where is the question? There's no space there. There's no time there. So time and space vanish before the presence of the immortal entity. The power of the soul becomes endless, boundless. The soul can pass through anything, including space, and envelop a man wherever one is. It will plunge through him, penetrate through him, and the man can listen to the voice of the person or his to whom he is actually related, as if he is sitting in our room. My God. Okay, we have understood so far. Time and space vanish before the presence of immortal entity. Before God, there is no question of time, there is no question of space. Everything is not there. Time, space, and self. Even self is not there because this merger has taken place. The individual soul has become part of the universal soul. So the self also is disappeared. And now he is talking about time being not there. Also, space being not there. And now he says the power of the soul becomes endless and boundless. Because it is merged in the entire thing, it is endless and boundless. There is no boundary to that power, there is no end to that power. It has also become immortal. The soul can pass through anything, including space, and envelop a man. So the soul, which is merged into the universal soul, it can pass through anything, including space, and envelop a man. Envelop a man means cover man or get into a man or become like a shield on the man. Pass through anything, including space, and envelop a man wherever one is. Let him be anywhere in the universe. It can envelop him. He can be anywhere, in any corner. Still, this particular power of the soul can envelop him, can also plunge through him. That power will plunge through him, means it will go through him, penetrate through him, and the man can listen to the voice of the person or his to whom he is actually related. His is in capital, means God's voice. When he has become part of the whole, the soul has become boundless and endless. The soul becomes endless and boundless because it has got merged with the universal. And that same soul can pass through anything, including space, and envelop a man wherever one is. So even if he is somewhere unknown area, because of that merger which has taken place, it will cover him, it will shield him. That will happen. It will pass through anything, because there is no question of soul cannot travel here, soul cannot travel there. It can travel anywhere and everywhere, and it can affect anything. It can envelop a man. Wherever one is, it will plunge through him. Plunge through him means it will go through him. Plunging is diving deep into that person. Wherever one is, it will plunge through him, penetrate through him. It will go through him and go the other side, penetrate through him. And the man can listen to the voice of the person or his to whom he is actually related, as if he is sitting in our room. As if we are sitting in very close proximity, as if he is sitting next to us. That's how we can listen to his voice. That's what he is saying. So man can listen to the voice of the person or his, this is capital his, to whom he is actually related. All of us are related to the universal creation or universal being. So the voice of the person, his voice, to whom he is actually related, as if he is sitting in our room. As if God is sitting in our room, that's how the relationship will take place. See, exactly when there is no division actually, there is no, he is still talking about the soul having power and all that. But once the soul has merged into universal soul or the soul of the world, this identity is lost completely. But then that person who has gone through that process, wherever he may be, this universal power, universal soul's power will go through him, will envelop him, will plunge through him, will penetrate through him, and he'll be able to listen to his voice, God's voice. That's what he's saying. Let us stop here, trying to understand the power of our soul. Tap that power to be with the ultimate source and reality. So he's saying, having given all this information, let us stop here, means ponder over this. Let us ponder over this. Let us think about it, trying to understand the power of our soul. Tap that power to be with that ultimate source and reality. If only you know the power of our soul, if the power of soul, if we know, is exactly what is there in the universal soul also. And the universal soul has certain powers. My individual soul also has got similar powers. So through efforts, through sadhana, this individual soul becomes part of the universal soul. So that person, even if he's in a forest or he's sitting on top of a mountain, wherever he is, that divine power, the soul's power, which is endless and boundless, envelops him, overtakes him, and it goes through him, it plunges through him, means the power will occupy him, it will penetrate through him, and then he can listen to the voice of his. He can listen to the voice of the ultimate as if that person and the person who is listening, they're sitting as if in one room. That's what Agrippa is saying. Now he says, let us stop here, trying to understand the power of our soul. Tap that power to be with the ultimate source and reality. So we should realize that we are powerful, our soul is powerful. So we should be able to make good use of that power, tap that power, so that we can become one with the ultimate source, is what he is suggesting. Let us stop here, trying to understand the power of our soul. Tap that power means make use of that power to be with that ultimate source and reality. Ultimate source. What is the ultimate source? The divine. So that source, if we have to get nearer to that source, we have to purify ourselves, and this soul should become part of that soul, universal soul. So that is reality. That is something which we all should work, and we should realize the powers of the soul. Actually, we all know that the soul has that sort of power, because we're describing so many times that it is very powerful, very pure, very clean. So many things are there, but we are not able to make use of that power because we are still caught in the matter. The spirit we are not able to touch. So he says, if we can tap that power, we can become part with the ultimate reality, ultimate source of reality. We can become part of that. HPB says, we can still seek proofs. We can still seek proofs of periods earlier to Hermetic philosophy. We can choose philosophers of pre-Christian ages, and they were not victims of superstition or anything like that, and we could believe them. So for all this, whatever has been talked about now, and this Agrippa also said, Hermes also sort of agreed with his findings, or Hermes already has found out, Agrippa perhaps is going with that finding. So HPB says, we can still seek proofs. Proofs means whether what all this Agrippa has said is true or not. HPB says we can still seek proofs earlier to the Hermetic philosophy. Hermes and Agrippa agreed with each other. Even prior to that, if you want to go and seek proofs, they're available, she says. We can choose philosophers of pre-Christian ages. Pre-Christian ages, even before Christ came into being, even before Christianity came into being, philosophers of that age, we can talk to them, we can choose to talk to them, and they were not victims of superstition. They were not someone who believed certain things without study, without meditation. They have understood because of the various tests they have done, and they've come to the proof of that. So they were not victims of superstition, and we could believe them. So because they were somebody who did all the good hard work. For example, Cicero, Cicero. This name also is familiar to us. We have touched upon this person, Cicero's daughter, we talked about. So Cicero, he was talking about gods, Gods, all small g. Cicero, he was talking about gods, and according to him, they were like humans in form. Cicero is saying something. He was talking about gods, not capital G, small g. And according to him, they were like humans in form. They could also be called atmospheric spirits. These gods can be called atmospheric spirits. They were as similar to human beings. That's what he said. This gentleman Cicero is saying. Cicero is saying he's talking about gods, not the capital G, the small gods, means people who have achieved divinity. And according to him, they were like humans in form. They looked like humans when somebody had a chance to look at them. They could also be called atmospheric spirits. They are the spirits which are available in the atmosphere which is around us. He says, that is Cicero says, gods never had form having flesh and blood. Having said human form, now he qualifies it by saying Okay, they were looking like human beings, all right, but they never had flesh and blood, unlike humans. Then how was that made of? We do not know. Cicero says they were like humans in form. They could also be called atmospheric spirits. And now he says gods never had forms having flesh and blood. They were looking like humans, but they never had blood or flesh in their body. Unlike humans, they were spirits. That's what he says. Unlike humans, they were spirits, but the spirits had a human form, but the spirits did not have in the form either blood or flesh. But they looked, the spirit assumed a form of a human, but sans, that is without blood or flesh. So they say, because he said atmospheric spirits, that is the spirit. He says gods never had form, having flesh and blood. Unlike humans, they were spirits. So they were spirits, not matter, but spirits. HPP says, Epicurus, Epicurus, another philosopher, for whom hidden things were tangible. Whatever are hidden, whatever is not seen, they were tangible to him. Such a work he has done. Maybe he was more than a clairvoyant. Epicurus, for whom hidden things were tangible, as if he had touched and felt them. So this is the power he had. Some things which others cannot see, they are invisible to all the rest. He can be confident that he can touch that and talk. That was the power he had. Epicurus had, for whom hidden things were tangible. Tangible means you can touch them, as if he had touched and felt them. Says, gods are not generally visible, but they are intelligible. This is what he is saying. Gods, again, small g, gods are not visible. We can't see them, but he can feel them perhaps. That's what the author HPB has said. He could feel them. For him, everything was tangible, but he is saying gods are not generally visible. Nobody can see them, but they're intelligible. Means they work with a lot of intelligence. They have a lot of intelligence. They were not having solid bodies. They were not having solid bodies. That is exactly what Cicero also said. They did not have flesh and blood, but they were looking like human form. They were spirits after all. So this gentleman also, Epicurus also saying the same thing. Though he could see them, though they were invisible, he still says because he has seen them. For others, he says gods are not generally visible, but they are intelligible. They have a lot of intelligence. They understand things, etc. They were not having solid bodies, but one can recognize them when their images passes. That means if suppose that spirit is going before us, if the spirit is going before us, what Epicurus is saying, we can identify the form, but one can recognize them when their images passes. That means maybe we can't feel them, we can't touch them. Maybe the form can be seen. We can't touch them. We can't tangibly, we cannot see them. Touch them. Tangibly, we cannot touch them, but we can see them. So when they pass before us, we can see them. That's what he's saying. So there are two different things. Touching is based on the ability to feel and understand, and seeing is just seeing with your eyes. So one could see them, but one is not capable of touching them. But then generally they are not visible. That's also another statement he made. Though he could see them, and now 2 lines later below he says, when the images passes, one can recognize them, he says. So I really don't know where we stand. Can we see them or can we not see them? I guess it all depends on with what sort of ability we have. If we got ability to see finer things, if we got ability to absorb finer atmospheric spirits, see them, we can see them. But if we are coarse, if we are not tuned good enough, maybe we will not be able to see them. So generally not visible, but they are intelligible. They were not having solid bodies, but one can recognize them when their images passes. The finer atoms of infinite space come together to produce such images. What causes the formation of the form? He is saying the finer atoms of infinite space come together to produce such images. So how the images are formed is the finer atoms of infinite space. Actually, they don't have limitations as far as space is concerned, but such atoms are coming together. The finer atoms are coming together, which have infinite space. They come together to produce such images, which are not solid bodies, but they are recognizable forms. But normally, ordinary people cannot see them, but this Epicurus could easily see them, touch them, etc., etc. And we can see them as happy, immortal beings. This is another thing he's saying. We can see them when we see them. That means those people who are capable of seeing them, we observe them being happy as immortal beings. They don't have death, so they are immortal. So we can see them happily moving about. And what is the constitution of those bodies? The finer atoms of infinite space, they come together to produce such forms. There are also atoms, all right, but very, very fine variety. So grosser variety is something perhaps we can touch, but this is the finer variety of atoms coming together to produce such images and forms. So we can see them as happy, immortal beings. This is also another statement of the Epicurus. And HPB has quoted Epicurus in this particular paragraph. Now, HPB is talking about the composition of etheric body. HPB is talking about the composition of etheric body. All these people like A.E. Powell and so many people, they have borrowed ideas only from H.P. Blavatsky. They have depended on H.P. Blavatsky to reconstruct or construct their versions of etheric double, etc., etc., astral body, mental body, all these things. She is the one who has given us the Bhiksha. She is the one who has given us the actual information. A lot of others have depended on her method of finding out through her extrasensory perception or whatever, and she has written it down, and they have made use of it, and then they have written individual treatises. And we think, sometimes we think A.E. Powell wrote about etheric double, A.E. Powell wrote about mental body, A.E. Powell wrote about astral body, but the base information is from Madame Blavatsky. This is something which we need to remember. Definitely she is the prime teacher. Blavatsky is the prime teacher. Rest of the people have depended on us, taken information from her, and rebuilt their structures. HPB talks about now the composition of etheric body. Mr. Levi, another initiate, is an initiate. Levi is the name. This also is a familiar name. Already we have touched upon this person in the previous chapters. Mr. Levi, another initiate, very lucidly says, means very clearly he says. Lucidity means clarity. Very lucidly says the magnetic vibrations of astral light. The magnetic vibrations of astral light are the Akasha Tattva produced when the human form is being formed or conceived, the first envelope of the soul, and that is the ethereal body. We have the Akasha Tattva, even just 2 pages earlier we have seen. It is there. The entire universe is covered by that material. The ether, the Akasha Tattva. It is also called by various other names. Anima Mundi, so many names it has. So that magnetic vibrations of the astral light The astral light is also Anima Mundi. And Akasha Tattva is also space, ether. So the astral light or the Akasha Tattva, that produced when just about the human form was being formed or conceived. So when that is getting sort of formed, the human body is being formed or conceived, at least thought about, the first envelope of the soul, that is the ethereal body. So the one which covers the soul, which is slightly grotesque in the sense, Sthula Sarira, and then the next is etheric double. Etheric double is also part of the physical body. So the human form, when it is being formed or conceived, the first envelope of the soul, that is the ethereal body, which is also called phantom or etheric double. Phantom means this Sthula Sarira is the actual. Sthula Sarira is the actual. The physical body is the actual. Just like this, just the similar shape, maybe slightly bigger than this. I give this usual example. I wear 42 size shirt, that is 44 size shirt. That's sort of a change in between. That is called a phantom. That's not real. Real is physical body. One which is attached to the physical body is the phantom, which is also called etheric double. That is also called the ethereal body. So Levi says, he's an initiate, very lucidly he says, the magnetic vibrations of astral light. Magnetic vibrations of astral light. The forces, the electricity force. Electricity is nothing but spirit. Electricity is nothing but spirit, Chaitanya. So magnetic electricity vibrations of astral light or the Akasha Tattva, they produce, when the human form is being formed or conceived, the first envelope of the soul. The first envelope of the soul is formed. That is ethereal body, which is also called phantom or etheric double. That gets disengaged only at the time of death. We know this. When the physical death takes place, the physical body falls, say, at a particular place, and maybe 10, 15 or 20 feet distance further away, that's where the etheric double also falls away. So the immediate death after the physical body is that of the etheric double. So the only way in which the physical body gets disengaged with the physical body is at the time of death. At the time of forming the human body, the first cover to the soul is this etheric double. So this is also called phantom or etheric double or ethereal body. Ethereal means made of the Akasha Tattva. So that's why it is not solid, but it is closer to the solid. Because our physical body is touchable, feelable, so that is there. Just adjacent to that is the etheric double. So the only way it can get disengaged is at the time of death. To project this ethereal body, to render it more objective, and to make the form more tangible by condensing the fluidic form, which are part of the divine parent essence, is one of the great secrets of the adept magician God. So Mr. Levi is saying this. To render it more objective means the ability that we can see the body also, if it is possible. To project the ethereal body, to render it more objective and to make the form more tangible. If somebody has to feel that body, etheric double, somebody can see that body by condensing the fluidic form. It is the fluid form, as he said, the astral light or the magnetic force. The fluid force has to be condensed. The fluidic form has to be condensed, which are part of the divine parent essence. This is part of the divine parent essence, means the entire thing is divine. So parent essence means the Mula Tattva. So the divine parent essence, the source of all, that essence, that is where the form becomes more tangible, more objective, And that work is done by the adept magician, that is God. That's what he's saying. To render it more objective and to make the form more tangible by condensing the fluidic form, which are part of the divine parent essence. This fluidic form is part of the parent essence, is one of the great secrets of the adept magician. This is one of the greatest secrets in nature of the magician who is God, adept magician who is God. So everything is done by him. The God's plan is there of how the human being should come and what sort of forms he should have, what sort of atoms should take place in it. All that is designed by him. So this is about the etheric double. Mr. Levy, another initiate, very lucidly says the magnetic vibrations of astral light are in the Akasha is this ethereal body, which is also called phantom or etheric double. Why we call phantom? Because actually it's physical body, just by the side of the physical body that is there, almost looking like this, like a double of this, as if we said double action in cinema, like that double of physical is the ethereal body. Phantom or etheric double that gets disengaged only at the time of death. Only at the time of death, the whole thing separates. Physical body falls, and after some distance, maybe 30 or 20 feet, the etheric double also will fall. To project the ethereal body, to render it more objective, to make the form more tangible by condensing the fluidic form, which are part of the divine parent essence, is one of the great secrets of the adept magician, God. So this is something which we need to understand. HPB talks about theurgical magic. Theurgical, Theurgical, magic. HPB talks about now theurgical magic. Magic performed with the aid of divine spirit. Magic performed with the aid of the divine spirit is called theurgical magic. Supernatural intervention. So when supernatural intervention takes place, with the aid of the divine spirit, magic is formed, magic is done, that is theurgical magic. A practice which was adopted by Platonists and the followers of Plato. So Plato and Platon students or disciples of Plato, they adopted this practice of theurgical magic. They say this divine prompted magic, this divine spirit prompted magic, it is the expression or ultimate expression of occult psychological science. The persons who are well versed in material sciences, academicians, reject this idea and they dismiss it as hallucination of the diseased brain. Plato and Plato's followers, they believed in this. They believed that it is possible to create theurgical magic, magic performed with the aid of the intervention of the divine spirit. This power to use the divine spirit and perform magic. They say this divine prompted magic which is prompted by the divine essence, is the expression or ultimate expression of occult psychological science. This is the ultimate thing which an occultist can do, or a psychologist can do, a science student of psychology can do. This is what they believe. This is what they used to do. The persons who are well versed in material sciences, but as against this practice of Plato, Platonists, as against that, the material scientists, academicians reject this theory and they dismiss it as hallucination of the diseased brain. So they say it's because your brain is spoiled, diseased. You are imagining that you can do certain things which are divine. It's not possible for you to do things which are divine. is what the material scientists are saying. The material scientists heap harsh criticism and call that as fraudulent claims of skills and powers. So not only having said hallucination, they also heap a lot of criticism, harsh criticism, and call the people like Platonists as fraudulent. They're claiming certain things, they're claiming some powers which are not true. HPB says, without really investigating, they're criticizing. The modern scientists, academicians are criticizing without really getting into the details of what Platonists have done. They have definitely done some theological magic performed with the aid of divine aid and spirit. So HPB says without really investigating, they're criticizing and says they have no right to do so. So this is what Madam Blavatsky is saying. Simply without proper investigation, you simply make a sweeping statement and say what all they have done or what they believe is not right. They don't know what they have done actually. They have really not got an idea. They don't have a hang of what Platonists did. But still, just dismissing them as hallucination, just telling them that they are all fraudulent, this is of no use. That's what HPV is saying. She says without really investigating, they're criticizing and says they have no right to do so. This is the problem of the modern scientists, is what Madam Blavatsky has been continuously saying. They don't trust the ancient scientists. They don't trust the ancient philosophers. Neither they can show something which will explain all those ancient truths. They cannot, because the modern science is material. So it cannot touch the spirit. So spiritual insight is not there for the modern scientists. But at the time of criticizing, though they do not know anything about the spirit, anything about the magic, they're able to say a lot of things against it, like, for example, calling them mental hallucinations or brain diseased. Because your brain is suffering with disease, you have imagined a lot of things. That's what they called Plato and Plato's students. And you are making claims fraudulently and saying that you have got some powers. So this is what Madam HPV is saying, that you cannot charge or you cannot criticize without really knowing what they have done. Shall we stop here? Mamata?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Right. We can continue, because I thought maybe just 2 or 3 pages, but then more than 6, 7 pages. Yeah, more than 6, 7. It will take a lot of time.
Yes, sir. If anybody want to speak, please, you can. Sir, criticism about yes, sir.
Tell me.
Criticism about ancient scientists la గురించి ఇది ఇప్పటికే ఉంది కదండి సార్, ఆ కాలంలోనే ఉంది అంటే ఇప్పుడు ఇంకా ఎక్కువ ఉంటుంది సార్ ఇది.
No two doctors agree, isn't it? Even now, no two doctors agree on a diagnosis. So people do mistrust, is always there. But those people did not have all these scientific instruments or scientific terminologies and all that, but still they have found out a lot of things because of their intuitional powers. But these people are not able to understand first, because something to do with the spirit. So they don't know anything related to matter, then modern scientists will be able to say. So simply because they don't know what is spirit, what is the thing which is called spirit, they simply say it is all hallucination. Remove it. That's how a lot of times the older scientists, older philosophers were run down by the modern scientists. But modern scientists do they have an explanation? They don't have an explanation. Take any field, whether it is astronomy, astrology, anywhere and everywhere. The older people, they did so much of work, but the new generation are not able to explain what they have done, or even give a good certificate. Yes, they have done well. They will never say, because it doesn't fit into their scheme of things. The modern scientists have a different way of looking at it, so they don't. But the most important thing I have found today, what was interesting is that the individual soul merging with the universal soul. And our individual soul has got tremendous powers. We have tremendous powers, which we normally we are not in a position to understand, because we are still with the body, we are still with the matter, we are not touched upon the spirit. But the spirit has a lot of powers. The soul has a lot of powers. So those powers, when properly used, I think that is magic. Those powers, when we use properly for the welfare of humanity, that is magic. So magic is all helpful magic, magic which is done with the aid of helping others. That is what we have to do with the power which is available with us, but then we don't know how to tap it. He said, tap that power. You know, you've got tremendous amount of power. The power is infinite, boundless. Tap that power. That's what he's saying. So how do we tap it? How do you get in touch with that power? So to get in touch with the spirit, the only way we know is meditation. There's no other way. Nobody can teach you what spirit is all about. What is something above matter is all about. We have to project ourselves. We have to travel beyond matter. Only that will take us to the spirit. So once we are there, we can understand the potency of that power, that boundless power, the limitless power, the infinite power, and all that. And that has got tremendous. And whatever that is, it is exactly what universal essence also about. Universal essence is the same thing. The power which is there with us also is the same thing, because here is a microcosm, that's a macrocosm. So entire thing is one and the same. And if you can understand that power, if you can get to hold that power, maybe you can do a lot of magic, theurgical magic. Magic with the intervention of divine force, that is theurgical magic. So for me, that seems to be the greatest lesson today, that we have the power, we have to gather that power, we have to understand that power, we have to marshal that power, we have to harvest that power. That is the term used, harvest that power. So epidemics and reasons for epidemics, all those things were there because the disturbances which are there in the ether, the epidemics come. Whenever there is a huge difference, the epidemic spreads fast. When there is a difference in the atmosphere, there is an epidemic which is taking place. So that traits and that antipathies and all that is due to the differences or the disturbances which are caused in the Akasha Tattva. So everything, I believe, just because we are thinking something which is not conducive to human beings, say for example, I am saying something, some ill thought I am having, that will go and affect the ether, and the adverse effect will come back to us. When I project an idea which is not helpful to humanity, when I leave that thought to the ether, it will come back to us and become something, become an epidemic or become a disease or affect that person or affect the person with whom they are living and things like that. So very, very important to always remember that we have to be positive and spread only good thoughts, because anything which goes and touches the ether, if you're making a bad influence there, that will get doubled and come back. It will come back. Even good is the same thing. Suppose you get up in the morning, every morning, and say 11 times that I want this, I want this, I want this. Say I want to meditate, something like that. You say that, and you have done that also before sleeping, say for example. Before sleeping, about 11 times you have said that. And those thoughts have gone into the ether. They get strengthened and come back to us when you are sleeping. So when you get up in the morning, when you remember the same thought, it gets strengthened one more time. So that's how the progress is made, they say. So for better things, even for worse things, when we send a bad thought, it comes back doubled. When you send a good thought, it comes back to you as a beneficial force doubled. So we should know how to use our thought power. This perhaps is one of the another lessons which is there.
Sir, you said tapping to that power. Is it
Mm.
same to every person, or it depends upon their sadhana, their eligibility, and it is individual process?
It's not usual, like it's a kilo of spirit. It's not like that. It's not measured like that. The amount of sadhana which you do, that determines how much of power you have. So it all depends on individual effort. So everything is individual, ma. Everything is individual effort. Though we do say
Yes.
that we have to go together, grow together, love each other, all that. But when it comes to the question of trying to tap that power which is within us, once we get hold of that power, once we get hold of the divine power, we can use it for the betterment of humanity. We can use it for the betterment of humanity. But to tap that power, to see that the power is within our grip, what is that we should do? We should do sadhana, that is individual. Your sadhana cannot be my result. My result cannot be your sadhana, isn't it? So it has to be our own. The more we do, the more we gain. After gaining, I use it for everybody's welfare. That is the ultimate thing which we are supposed to do. And talking about the forces which they do not need a door or they don't need a wall, this is very true. This is very true. They can simply come through the wall.
అవును సార్, ఇది మనం ఏదో అనుకుంటాం కానీ అంటే మనకి స్పిరిట్ గురించి చెప్తున్నప్పుడు ఇలా చెప్తారు కదా సార్, అంటే దయ్యాలు భూతాలు అనే ఉద్దేశంలో.
Anything, good things kuda, good spirits kuda. Good spirits, suppose they want to come and help you. Suppose you are sitting and trying to write something and somebody wants to come and help you. They can come up to your writing table, though the door is locked or the wall is closed or whatever it is, they can come through that. So I have seen this happening personally myself. This is, of course, something very, very silly, not very powerful thing, but in a place where we used to live in Sri Ram colony, there used to be a huge cashew tree, and one half of the window is open and the other half is closed to my room where I used to sleep. Because my brother was not there, he had gone to Guntur. So I used to sleep in that room. And somehow I started looking out into the window. I saw a huge lot of people were going around the tree. Small spirits, big. They were all going through, dancing as if around the tree. So I said, okay, fine, something is happening. Then I suddenly got scared. So I closed the doors, I closed the windows, and the door was anyway closed. But then you know what happened? The leader of that group came through the wall and went into the kitchen and disappeared from the kitchen. The kitchen was something adjacent to the room where I was. So it came through my room, went into the dining hall, went into the kitchen, went out of the kitchen. I was scared again. I closed my door, which will go to the dining space. But when it can come through the wall, it can come through a door. But I didn't know at that point of time. You get get what I'm saying?
Yes.
See, it came through the wall. It came through the wall. It came through the wall, went through the open door, went into the dining space, went into the kitchen, and disappeared from there. So I was thinking, suppose it comes back. It has gone out. Suppose it comes. So I was worried. So I closed my wooden door, which will go to the dining space. I'm a fool. When it can come through the wall, it can come through this wooden thing also. But I just did that out of fear. It is fear, because having seen something like that, I didn't know what it was. Maybe I was about 22, 23-year-old. Or maybe more than that, 24-year-old.
How we will come to know that it's a mischievous spirit or it came to help us? How can we know, sir?
I told you, the experience of the watch and ward. Similar would be suppose you have put your book somewhere which you want to study. It goes to the dining hall, say, for example. I'm just giving an example. I put a book which I thought early morning when I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I should see. But some spirit has carried that and put it on the dining table in the next room. So what does it mean? I didn't go and put it there. Some mischievous spirit has done it, isn't it? So they're always there. We can't deny their presence. Only thing if you are strong enough, as somebody was saying the other day, if you are strong enough, mentally strong enough, that won't affect us. But if you are weak, we'll have to face the consequences. So if we are not weak, if we're strong enough, then there's no problem. As long as the dance was going around the cashew tree, I was enjoying the dance which they were doing. The minute that chief came through, I was scared because it came into the room. I said, what is this? Was it upset because I was looking? I don't know what it was. It came into the room, went through the door which was open, went into the dining space, went into the kitchen door and walked out and disappeared from the wall which is there and went out of the kitchen space. So maybe they're disturbed sometimes. They can definitely see somebody is looking at us, somebody is perhaps causing disturbance to us, something like that. Maybe this is what I'm guessing. How do we recognize means? Yes, they do cause harm. They do cause harm. Especially those things which cause harm are more dangerous. Yes, they are there, but we have to be careful.
Nice.
That's why people say that whatever may be the reasons, you don't have to be on the roads late in the night, especially late in the night. One is not supposed to be there because however strong you are, you may get affected by them. You may say, yes, I'm not. You may say, I'm not affected. Any tree for that matter, any tree. Because there are two things. It is leaving carbon dioxide, one. Number two, they become the adda for these spirits. So these two things, both are possible.
Sir, what kind of firewall, how we can protect ourselves by a firewall, sir? Like being strong or something else?
Yes, mentally becoming strong, that all these things will not affect me. That assertions which you have to make to ourselves. Nothing in this world other than what I see physically, what is that I believe in the supernatural power, which is helpful power. I don't believe in this. I don't give credence to it. That sort of assertions if you make on, if you continue to make, if you believe in that, if you repeat that, that won't. This is something mentally we have to become strong, that is all. And I've told you the other day, coming back from the main gate, at the first Trilithon, there is a bush which looks like a man standing there. It's a plant which is cut in the shape of a man. But then coming from a distance, when you're coming through, maybe at 10 o'clock or 10:30 even, no lights, you see as if something is standing there. That's again, sometimes mental imagination that might give scope for somebody to enter there, some spirit to enter there, because you're weak. You've become weak. So something enters there. They're waiting when you will become weak. They're waiting when you will become weak. Tuck, they'll occupy. This is the problem. So we have to be strong means, yes, meditation, assertions, all these things will help. They will not touch us. Those spirits will not touch us. లోపల నుంచి మనం స్ట్రాంగ్ అవ్వాలి. బయట నుంచి స్ట్రెంగ్త్ రాదు. లోపల నుంచి స్ట్రెంగ్త్ వస్తే you become stronger. It is nothing from without will make you stronger. From within you have to become stronger. That is exactly what we have to do.